Coming to you through the zeros and ones, I'm RJ Balde, and this is the Trichome's Hash It Out podcast. On this show, we feature conversations about trending cannabis topics. We also bring in industry insiders and influencers to discuss their points of view. In this episode, I'll be talking to Gina Kranwinkel about the National Association of Cannabis Businesses Social Equity Conference and the goals moving forward to ensure equitable access to cannabis businesses and opportunities. Without further ado, it's time to hash it out. My guest today is the president and CEO of the National Association of Cannabis Businesses, or Nacb. Welcome to the show, Gina Kranwinkel. Hi, Gina. How are you today?
Good. So happy to be here, RJ. How are you?
You know what? We are thriving and surviving. It is chilly here in SoCal, but we're doing okay. The allergies are under control today, so you know what? We're counting our blessings as they come.
I'm so glad to hear that. And how
Yeah.
is everything with COVID there?
You know, I can't complain personally. I've had, personally for me and for all of the people directly around me, we've all been blessed with good health throughout this year. My extended family, for the most part, too. I did have some people that caught COVID-19, but they made full recoveries and aren't experiencing any sort of lasting symptoms, if you will, or long-term damage that we can tell. So, we have made it out better than a lot of people out there. And so we are very grateful for that. How about you? Where are you joining us virtually from, and how have things been going over there?
I am joining you from New Zealand.
Whoa!
Yes,
New Zealand.
I was here before the lockdown and was going to be coming back to the States in March, and then everything got shut down and everyone moved to working remotely. So I said, well, if I can work remotely, why not stay here in New Zealand and do that?
Right. Why not?
Yeah.
There are worse places to be quarantined, huh?
Oh, I mean, this definitely is a lovely place. And luckily, we are doing very well with COVID-19, thanks to the Prime Minister here. The government has really done a really great job on isolating this disease.
That's great.
And cannabis, medicinal cannabis, is up and running here. It's been up and running since April. And I have just been at a conference for their first medicinal cannabis conference in New Zealand, and it was really wonderful. Good number of people in attendance, and then we had a lot of Zoom calls as well, and can't wait to see the future of cannabis in this country.
That is so cool. That is awesome. So was that an in-person event? Was it virtual? Was it sort of like a hybrid that some people are doing nowadays?
It was a hybrid. So there were a couple of hundred people in attendance. And then we had a lot of video calls as well. And I believe I think that there was some recording at the conference, and all the Zoom calls were recorded so that people could look online. So we've had a little bit of everywhere, because New Zealand right now is locked down. So no one could actually fly in for the conference, but the people who were already here were able to attend.
Right. Wow, that's so cool. That's so awesome. And I'm, of course, extremely glad to hear that not only are you doing well in New Zealand, you have your health and you're in a beautiful location, but you're also staying busy. Are you the only person working in New Zealand? Is the rest of the Nacb team elsewhere, if you will?
Yes. The rest of the Nacb team is still in the States. We have people in Virginia, in Arizona, in Milwaukee, and some other places. And normally I am based in New York City. So I will eventually be coming back to the States. We'll see what happens with COVID-19, and we then are able to see each other in person. And so that will be great.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, what the timeline is on that, because how do you even make travel plans anymore with with everything going on? Are you kind of just playing it by ear for the most part for
I,
now?
I'm just playing it by ear and trying to see what I can do here to help cannabis. I know that lots of people from the States are in support of the movement that they have made to legalize medicinal cannabis here. And many
Mhm.
people have told me from the States that, we want to help as much as possible. So, I'm sort of that linkage for the States and New Zealand right now and just really hope to help them in any way possible. They
That's
have some
rad.
really
You're
great experts here and can't wait to see the products that they will make. And all of the products will be medical grade cannabis and be legalized on what an FDA sort of New Zealand's FDA standard. So
Yeah. Look at you acting as a cannabis ambassador for the United States and New Zealand. We love that. That's so awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. So I'm guessing you saw the clip of Jacinda Ardern saying that she smoked cannabis before in what was the debate that they had before the election, huh?
yes, and they just recently had a bill to legalize adult use of cannabis that unfortunately did not get passed, but really just slightly lost. There was a vote of no for just 50.7% of the people. So it
Mm,
was really just, majority of the people, I think, are changing their minds and getting the stigma taken away from cannabis. And hopefully we can see recreational use of cannabis in New Zealand in the next upcoming few years. But right now, they've decided to just solely focus on medicinal. But
mm.
the prime minister did vote yes in support of recreational cannabis. So it looks very promising for the future of cannabis here in New Zealand.
I love that. Fingers crossed. Shout out to
Mm-hmm.
the Prime Minister. That's awesome. We mentioned before we started recording here that you are, of course, the CEO of NACB. But you mentioned that you're oftentimes fine without being introduced with that title because, you sort of try to make it a point to remind yourself that in the grand scope of things, you are a part of this big team that makes up NACB. Um, how has the work been in the time of quarantine and remote work and working from home? Were you doing a lot of that before quarantine with a lot of the teams spread out across the nation and the world? And how much of your work has really changed during this time?
So actually, quarantine for us was not as challenging for as many companies face because we were used to working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
It did hinder us in some ways because we would see each other at least quarterly to have quarterly meetings. And then I would be traveling around to different states and speaking with people in person. And some of our team members would also be getting. So, as everyone knows, it's really difficult to do work without speaking to a person face to face. You try to do emails and video calls and just having conversations and making sure that you understand your goals and objectives and outcomes and everyone is included and a part of the conversation, but there's still about 20 to 30% degree that um, really helps to be in front of a person and just have those organic ideas where you're just on this whiteboard and you're sitting together and things, those ideas just start to flow. So that has been a little difficult, but we were definitely ahead of the curve because we are a remote team already. So as everyone, we found it a little bit challenging, but we were properly prepared on how to work remotely in the first place. So very fortunate
Got
for
it.
that. I
Yeah.
am normally on the road. Last year, I was probably on the road about 2 to 3 weeks out of every single month. So it was probably a different change of pace for me to be like, oh, I'm in one place. And we had lockdown here in New Zealand. So then I was even more in one place with
Right.
not being able to really move very far beyond my house here. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was, sort of different challenges of like, how am I able to still communicate with the cannabis industry, but all of us having to do that via email and video chats. And I think the industry did a really great job of stepping up to that challenge. I have never had so many video chat Zoom calls in my life. And I think everybody said, okay, well, if we can't meet in person, we're going to take all of our conferences and bring it onto a virtual platform. And
Right.
I have seen remarkable, inventive ways that has happened. And just we're going to be having a social equity conference on Monday
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
using the Emerge Canna platform, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but it is an avatar like conference hall where you can go in, create an avatar for yourself, walk around to different booths, chat with people in a chat box so you can have private conversation. And it was like for the first time I was seeing people again. So we were
Yeah.
really lucky to be able to partner with Emerge Canna to have our social equity conference. And I've seen some other great platforms that have been available with other conferences. So cannabis industry, you did a fantastic job to moving online.
Oh yeah, straight up, straight up. That's something that I have definitely noticed in my times talking to different people in different avenues of the cannabis industry on this podcast is the the adaptability is extraordinary. The flexing of the nimbleness of people in this industry has been really inspiring during this time. It really hasn't slowed anybody down in any way, or if it has, they've found innovative ways to get themselves out of that place. Which I mean, of course, that's not a blanket statement for everyone. There's of course countless amounts of individuals and businesses struggling out there, but the innovation has been inspiring to say the least. Is that platform that you mentioned? Is that the one where you make the avatar? Is that the VR platform?
I'm not sure what
Okay.
the exact title name is. I can say it's sort of like that Sims video
Yeah, that's
game.
okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad that I'm in cannabis and not IT. I couldn't tell you the first thing about the platform's technical names.
Man, I would play like a cannabis Sims expansion pack. I would definitely get me one of those. Canna Sims. I would play that. That sounds like a lot of
Mm.
fun.
You never know;
Mm.
it might come out soon just because you mentioned it.
I'll have to write it down. I'll have to write it down. Keep my eyes on it. Um that's so rad. That's so awesome that you have that coming up. Let's talk about that social equity virtual conference. Can you tell me more about what the goal of that conference is and what exactly social equity means to you personally and in the cannabis industry?
Mm. You know, as you mentioned earlier, what has happened during this sort of COVID-19 lockdown period for us? And
Mm-hmm.
the number one thing that we saw was social equity. We saw protests and movements that all around the country about minorities and social equity issues that we have in today's society, and this war on drugs that really has targeted a huge, disproportionately impacted areas.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we sort of have taken this approach. So we heard the voice of the industry and in society that we need to change what has happened. We need to help the lower income groups out there. We need to help the minority groups change and redevelop and get that opportunity to lower that barrier of entry into the cannabis industry. But all
Mm-hmm.
around, with there has been this community that is being targeted, and they don't have the opportunities that everybody else has.
Right.
They are being blocked with education. Education is the number one tool that keeps people down.
Mm.
And if they aren't able to advance, we see that with just in the prison systems. Majority
Mhm.
of people incarcerated do not have a high school degree. Recently, their violence has increased in New York City, and people really don't understand it. There have been so many people who have moved out of New York City and said, "We don't like what has happened with COVID-19. We don't like the apartments that we're living in. It's too small, and if we don't have the opportunities of entertainment around, we don't want to be here." So they've moved.
Right.
But what happens to those low income families that don't have those opportunities? They don't have the fundings to say, "I don't like it here anymore," or "it is unsafe." And
Mm.
unfortunately, sometimes they react in violence to get that across. And so, what we're trying to say is we need to figure out what is the root cause of this problem in society and start funding that. So, NACB has come out with social equity guidelines that we are sending around to state legislators and how they can reduce the barrier of entry into the cannabis industry and
Mhm.
also give back from cannabis tax fund revenue to these communities to help programs like violence prevention, education, legal aid, community programs to really develop that these communities and to progress because we are only as weak as our lowest components. And if we don't
Mm.
want to raise that in society, we are all going to feel that undercurrent and not be ordered to advance to the degree that is the American dream here.
Mm.
Oftentimes, as we saw before, we have allowed a government to focus on us and we became much more individual.
Right.
And in the last 4 years, people have started to say, "Hey, I need to help my fellow man and get back," as the title of our conference right now is, "For Liberty and Justice for All." What our founding fathers meant when they said that was for all of us to be able to rise together and be one with each other and to help support each other. And that's what we really want to bring it back to. We want to say, what are the issues right now? You are targeting Blacks, you are targeting Hispanics with this war on drugs. You are also targeting other people as well. And we need to take this back into our control and say, we can't pretend that this is not happening. We need to figure out a pathway in order to help these individuals. And how can we do that? And
Mm.
our conference will go into a lot of discussion about this. So we will discuss about how to lobby and how to advocate. What are these key phrases that they keep on saying? What is diversity? What is inclusion? What is
Mm.
tokenism? Uh,
Mm. Yes.
why is it okay to have a minority association?
Mm.
This discussion that keeps on going on, and we talk about how can you create more diversity in your workplace and inclusion because we don't want just something that is diverse if you're not giving them any voices. Inclusion is about empowering those individuals,
Yes.
lowering your entry into a job because we do not have to go based on that college degree. People have life experience that is the same as your college degree and oftentimes even better. And
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
a teacher. I teach at the City University of New York. And I know that education is vital and important, but education is not only in a classroom. We
Mm.
learn that by our experiences in life as well. And we can judge people on getting jobs on that same sort of platform.
Mm. Mm.
And
That's so true.
and our
Yes.
last session of the day will be the journey of the social equity licensee. So
Mhm.
we want to hear their stories. How is this impacting them? what has happened to them, what have been some challenges, and what needs to be changed. Without speaking to these individuals, we don't know. We are guessing. So
Right.
it's really important to bring them into the story. And sometimes they're really overlooked.
Right.
We will also have representatives who are coming in from Portland, and we also have someone coming in from Denver, and saying we are creating social equity guidelines, and these are the reasons why, and this is the goals of them.
Mm.
And so we're going to say, okay, this is what your goals are, but are you achieving that? Are these social equity candidates really getting and meant that opportunity, or are they still being hindered? Because as we know, at Massachusetts, the delivery system was supposed to be given to minority groups, but they
Mm-hmm.
have again and again faced the same challenges of even getting it started and in place. So we're going to hear from many experts on these topics to address these issues and address social equity in many, many different ways. And it's important to see how they impact on each other and to see social equity play out in different ways, because it's not just one word, it's not
Right.
one definition. It's how we are all living together. And
Right.
it's about making everyone equal. And it's not just about having different races around, but it's like, how do you treat um, someone who has a disability? You have,
Mm.
what do they need? Or someone who has a different religion, and
Mm-hmm.
allowing them to give them that time as a job and say, oh, it's okay to take those days off because that is your holiday. And just
Right.
us really being open minded to what this word really means and how we can help support each other in society.
I love that you say that social equity isn't, it doesn't have just one blanket definition. It's a verb, right? Social equity. It's something that you do. It's not it's not an abstract idea. You can implement it in intangible ways, but it's really, bringing the bucket to the sand or bringing the pen to the paper that really gets it done. It's through the action. It's through the verb of reaching social equity.
Hmm.
Um, how many of these social equity conferences has NACB had in the past so far?
This is our first social equity conference that
Oh, but
we
you've
are
had
doing.
conferences before. NACB's held conferences. This is the first one focused on social equity.
Um, we have had workshops, so we have had people gathered and we talked about different topics, and we've had a whole day of those assemblies. But this is the first
Mm-hmm.
time we're doing panel discussions.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Normally, we've had one speaker and just different workshops throughout a day. We've talked about accounting, we've talked about employment, other challenges for the
Mm-hmm.
industry as well. This one was geared because we just came out with a social equity recommendations,
Right.
and it is important in society. It is not just an issue for the cannabis industry, but it is an issue for the United States of America as a whole. So it was
Right.
important, and this will just be one of many things that we will be doing for social equity. Our next step is a call to action where we will give people a template in order to send this, read our social equity recommendations, which are online right now, and be in support of them and send them off to your local representative or your state representative to really try and incorporate and say, this is how you can implement social equity into your cannabis industry that has already been established. And
Mm.
sometimes people just need those guidelines. So the people have spoken. We want to hear your voices. We want to hear more of them. We want to hear more of the issues that are impacting you. So this is just version one of what we've created. And we have
Hmm.
to know that we need to revise it and change it and pivot, because just because we want something, or we say that something is a problem, and when we think that this will change it, we have to constantly be evaluating it and
Mm.
saying, this was our goal. Did we hit that target? Yes, no. If we haven't, why not? What
Mm,
other challenges did we not take into account that might be blocking that? Which I think is sometimes is a problem. Making sure that people are held accountable for implementing these ideas and making sure that what they envision is actually happening. Because
right.
if it was that simple as me saying, this is what you need to do, and that's the only thing you need to do, and nothing else, everyone would have done it. So,
Right, right. Totally.
but
Yeah.
we did want to present a blueprint of saying, take what you want. These are really good ideas. We have done extensive research. We have analyzed all of the social equity programs out there. We have seen what they all agree upon, what has worked, what hasn't worked, why hasn't it worked. We send it to experts out there, and this is what we have gathered together. And we
Mhm.
just want to get that word out there and say, come join us, support this cause, support the people of the United States.
Right. I love that. Yeah, we are only as strong as our most underserved communities.
Agreed.
And that's something that I truly believe with, and I remind myself of that as often as I possibly can. Um, so you mentioned that it's the first social equity conference of its kind for NACB. Uh, can you tell me why you thought this year in particular was the year to do this conference with in-person events canceled for the year? You decided to go virtual. Why did you feel like this year was the year to do it? And had the events of the year, or even the past 4 years, or however many years, did the recent events bolster the drive to hold this event at all?
Well, one of the things that we do at NACB is to try to hear the voice of the industry. What
Mm-hmm.
is happening in the industry? What do they want us to address? What are the challenges that they're facing? And
Mm-hmm.
this year, it was all about social equity. As you know, we've had this Black Lives movement in society that has really taken off. The stuff that
Mm-hmm.
have happened with the police officers recently, and other challenges in society. And I feel that anytime anything happens in society, it's going to impact an industry.
Mm.
And I am so happy to be a part of the cannabis industry because they heard the cries of what was happening in society and has taken this challenge upon themselves to say, how can we work together to change the issues that we are seeing into society? And there are
Mm.
many people out there who have taken this challenge along by either giving free memberships, by becoming um, an ambassador for it, having their voice be heard and saying we are supporting it, hiring minorities, saying what is wrong with my own business here? Am I not supporting people the way that I should?
Mm-hmm.
Going workshops, being mentors, taking this challenge and saying, how can we make these changes and create a better world and a better industry?
I
And
love that.
so when we've heard that, we've
Mm-hmm.
said, well, we have noticed oftentimes with legislators are always saying, we want to help, but how do we do that? So that is the blueprints that we've created. These are some ways that you can change. And
Mm.
we've given them a number of ways and said, how can we give low interest loans? What programs do social equity licensees need? Because you can't just say, okay, we're going to lower the barrier so you can come into the industry. Well, there is support that they need in order to
Right.
be successful. And that is the key point here. We don't
Mm-hmm.
just want entry, we want support of
Mm.
these individuals. And that,
Mm.
and that is one of the key things and often overlooked.
Yes.
Um, and so that's what we're doing. So this is what the industry is speaking about. This is what society is speaking about as a whole. And we said, we've had the opportunity, because we are not running to, I'm not going around all the time for 2 or 3 weeks. We have
Mm-hmm.
had the opportunity to have more time on our hands to be able to create a conference and to get different perspectives of social equity and have everybody's voice be heard.
Mm.
Um,
That's so rad. Yeah. And you mentioned that while the tickets are free for the conference, which they can get online through NACB's website, right?
yes,
NACB.
if they go to
Yeah.
nacb.com, they can go onto our website and click on to sign up
Mm-hmm.
and for the event that will be held on Monday.
Right on, yeah, and you mentioned the tickets are free, but NACB is encouraging folks to support the Cannabis Impact Fund. So, can you tell me a little bit more about that and why you decided that was the right organization to partner with on this?
Yes. What as we're taking for the conference 6 different approaches to understanding about social equity. The
Okay.
Cannabis Impact Fund also does the same thing. They will take the entirety of the funds and subdivide it to 6 different groups. So they do Black Future Lives, Color of Change, the Bell Project, the Hood Incubator, Minority Cannabis Business Association, and Minorities for Medical Marijuana.
Got it.
And one of the things that I wanted to do was to say there is not only one group out there that are trying to change the social equity problems that we're facing. There are
Mm-hmm.
many of them. So we were able to support everyone or many different groups than just one different perspective. And it is important. We need to be able to allow people to have the bail that they need to not be incarcerated and to have better lawyers. We needed to understand what was with the Hood Incubator of supporting community projects.
Mm-hmm.
We need to support associations who are trying to make changes and workshops um, in order to help these social equity licensees. So there were many different degrees of people we wanted to support, and this fund does just that.
I love that. I love that. It's always great that you know people with like-minded goals and like-minded passions can work together for something as noble as a cause like this. Is just it's never not inspiring to hear, and that's one of my favorite things about hosting this show is getting to speak to individuals like yourself who are really you know walking even more than they are talking. You know what I mean? You really walk the walk, and that is it's an endless supply of inspiration. So that's so great to hear. um Now, talking about the NACB's recently released social equity program guidelines, which you've kind of hinted on a little bit earlier. The guidelines include a wide range of topics from judicial reform, reinvesting in disproportionately affected areas, the automatic record expungement for those convicted of cannabis crimes or cannabis related crimes. So tell me more about the process that you had to undertake in terms of narrowing down the focuses of the program into what is now published as the executive summary of the guidelines on your site.
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned previously, we did research into all of the social equity programs in the cannabis industry that are out there. What were
Mm-hmm.
some that they were all relatable? You know, what did they continuously mention? Which is
Mm-hmm.
important because if we can have consensus on something, that means okay, 100% this is a problem. And there
Sure.
were many of them, you know, who are like, we want to help these disproportionately impacted areas. We need to lower the barrier of entry. How do we go about doing that? You know, a lot of them said we want reduce application fees. So there was consensus around this, which was great. So this is not a new idea. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're using what a lot of people are in agreement about.
Right.
And so we did a comparison, and then we did our research. So what have the comments been and what have the challenges been in implementing this into those current cities or into that state? And then we reviewed those. Ohio had their social equity program considered unconstitutional. We've reviewed that. Why were those issues? Which was about the quota system for different minority groups, and so that was considered to be unconstitutional. So we were said, okay. So what we did was learn from what was already established, which is very important. If we can only build upon things and make them better if we understand why it has failed. And then we brought it to experts in the industry to say, okay, this is our foundation. This is our version. Please edit it for us. Is 5% going to be enough to support the services that social equity licensees need? Is 20% too much of a request for tax revenue funds to go back into disproportionately impacted areas? What do we need? What are we not seeing? And, we've gotten lots of feedback and information, and we have revised this. This is, as I said, this is version 1. We're hoping that, people will like what we're saying and it could be easily incorporated. We also found a number of challenges with some of the social equity programs that are set up and what some of them really aren't doing. So we try to stay away from those. One of the most challenging things that I saw and that could create a really big problems in some states is that cities and counties have the ability to opt out of social equity programs. And this should not be a choice. This impacts the citizens of your state. There needs to be a consensus that the states say, we support every single person. You do not get the opportunity to say, this doesn't impact me, so I will not support it. We must not look just at ourselves and say, how does this impact me? It is a very shallow thought. And actually, if you took a really deep research dive into that, anything that happens in society eventually impacts you. It may not impact you in a major way, but it impacts you in a smaller way. If we have too many people who are unemployed, or we have people who get kicked out of their house because they're not getting paid enough, or we have people who work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, no matter if you are a millionaire or not, it impacts you. It impacts the economy in huge, major ways. It impacts you on the streets that you walk in, from the people who are irritable or half asleep who may bump into you, or an accident may happen, and it impacts our hospitals. It impacts the people around us, and that impacts us as society, even if that is just the energy and tension that you have in your state. It impacts you. And we cannot become so individual of a society that says me, me, me. That is not what democracy is built upon. It is us. It is in the entirety. And if one person suffers, we all suffer. We should not vote or choose to allow for a social equity program to be in our communities because it is not impacting us. If we call ourselves the United States of America, we have to behave like that. every single individual out there has to look out for the common good of all.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that is what was the problem here. We need to hold everybody accountable for taking part in moving our society up as a whole. And that was
Absolutely.
the huge challenge, was accountability for implementing social equity programs and making sure that what were intended for was actually happening. Having a cannabis board, we recommended, having a diversity on that board, and not of saying you cannot talk about a disproportionately impacted area and where those funds should go to if you do not have people from that community on the board.
Right, right.
You cannot make a clear, accurate decision without that. I
Right.
think commonly it is overlooked. You will
Mm.
never do justice. I may know what is happening in my community, but I don't know what's happening in another person's community. And each and every disproportionate community will be different. Also,
Mm.
you needed people from the cannabis industry on these boards and from
Oh,
different
fancy that.
sectors of the cannabis industry, because it is
Yes.
a unique sector. It is
Yes.
not just like private, it's not just another business.
Yes.
And so we made those things held. Also, about getting the support that social equity licensees need. Okay, I'm going to give you a reduced application. Oh, but you're going to have to figure out how to get the money. So then they partner with someone else who may have the money, but then they don't get as much say because they don't hold the purse. We
Right.
don't want that to happen. We don't want them
Right.
just to be able to have a step in, but not be empowered. We don't want them to come into cannabis and then say, I'm not sure what I need to do in order to be successful.
Mm.
I'm not sure about accounting. I'm not sure how the tax system works. I'm not sure about advertising. We need to train and develop them and give them the skills in order to be successful. We have recommended about 5% of cannabis tax revenue go in order to support these programs, because you can't implement something and not support it. I think
Right.
oftentimes people like to say, well, I did something,
Yeah.
great, but it only hurts us if we don't support the people and then they fail.
Sure.
First of all, you haven't helped and you've probably done harm. So when you want to
Mhm.
create something, the number one thing that we should all remember is do no harm. Okay? If we
Mm.
implement this, will this do any harm? And if it is, what do we need to do in order to help fix that situation? And I know, there is a huge learning curve in the cannabis industry, as I'm sure that you have seen. It's
Sure.
unlike other industries. I learn something new all the time.
Yep. Yep. That's for
Uh,
sure.
and one thing definitely for me was decriminalization versus expungement.
Mm.
Um, it's fine to say, we have now said people will not be incarcerated for having cannabis on them. But what about those people who are spending time incarcerated for it right now?
Yeah.
Imagine being in prison for something that is legal now. Do you
Yeah.
think
Oh
that
my
people
God.
are happy about that? Do you think
Ah,
it was worth it? Are there times being spent in prison developing them into a different person? That's something that you're saying we made a mistake on. We have said
mm.
that cannabis couldn't help with any medical condition. We have
Mm.
been found out to be wrong, right?
Mhm.
Now
Yep.
we need to take the step and say, we have incarcerated you, but you know what? Maybe we lessen your degree. or maybe we remove it altogether. But we need to, as we develop and as we change, we need to change the entire structure, not just one part. We can't say, oh, we're going to create social equity program and then say, oh, but all the people who are incarcerated is okay. No.
Right.
As we legalize cannabis in different states, we have to address these issues. And it is okay that society has changed and we are going to revise our decisions of the people who have been incarcerated for it. And there is a lot of issues that happen with the judicial system, which was about rehabilitation and growing individual characters. But unfortunately, that is not really happening in the prison system right now. So it can actually harm people to go through this process, because trying to go back into society, they deal with many roadblocks to the stigma of being incarcerated. So
yeah,
we need to start thinking about that altogether.
absolutely.
And we want it not just to help a few. This issue that is happening in society doesn't just impact a few people. It impacts entire communities. It impacts the entirety of society. So, as you mentioned, we have requested that 20% of tax revenue go back into these disproportionately impact areas to help individuals. We need the legal aid. We need education. Number one way to really help someone is to educate them.
Yes.
We need
Absolutely.
community programs, or we need violence prevention. We have to get to the root cause of this problem, because if we do not, then all we're doing is putting a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah. Yep.
Saying we're examine the problem, this is the problem, and it's just going to go away. If we do not go to that root, pull that root out, change the minds, change what has created this, we are only going to fix it for a short amount of time, and it's just going to continue this circle. We want to cut it out. We want to change it forever. We want to grow as a nation and be stronger and better.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you about this then, in that sort of same vein. New Zealand had an election recently, and it turns out that the U.S. had an election recently too. Lucky for you, you were not physically in the United States for that. But how do you see, or how do you think social equity programs bode both inside and outside of the cannabis industry under the newly elected presidential administration? How would a Biden-Harris administration differ from that of a Trump-Pence administration in terms of social equity, do you think? I mean, we of course we don't know for sure, but what are you hoping will happen?
I am hoping with the Biden administration, we create this unity that we have started, and it just enhances and grows. And we start realizing that we all impact on each other, and that we all need to care about each other, and we can't just look at one person. I feel that Biden's administration, VP-elect Harrison, cares about each and every individual out there, each group. They care about the economy as a whole. I think that we are going to see that with a lot of legislation that will come out. Trump continues to create division in society. This person versus another person, those supporters of me versus the other supporters. There were good people on each side. He tends to make fun of different groups, whether that be disability, women. We've had many, many challenges out there. He likes to joke, as he calls it. Um, he hasn't set an example of unity. He has made a definite, clear indication that separation is okay, and and promotes it. And I feel that when you set that example for the people of the United States, anyone who has unconscious bias or conscious bias opinions,
Mm-hmm.
feels censored in some ways, now feels I can say what I want, I can do what I want because it's all about me and it's not about us. And we
Mm.
have really seen that over the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, just because there were good people on both sides doesn't mean that some people's behaviors were uncalled for or unnecessary. And he
Right.
tends to point out democratic minorities, bad behavior, or what he wouldn't do more than he tends to do for other groups.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen
Yeah.
the issues that have been caused, and we have seen a lack of leadership, and we have seen a lack of response even to COVID-19.
Yeah. Damn right. That's for sure. Um, yeah, it's uh, ever since the election passed, I the day that it was called, I did sort of there was like a collective exhale, I feel like, in the nation. But it was short lived, right? Because the very next day, I personally realized that, it was a great moment of celebration. We have something to look forward to in the next 70 some odd days, but we still have that 70 some odd days to get through. And, the amount of damage that he can cause in 70 days, I feel like I'm just sort of bracing myself for personally, and waiting to see what he might think of doing on his way out, because of course he's going to go down kicking and screaming, but he will go out, and that's something to look forward to. But I feel like it's not a moment for complacency, though. It's a moment to, of course, reflect on the impending end of, this dark era, and hopefully a time to usher in an age where we can make America empathetic again. Because for the past 4 years, I feel like, up until, recently, with President elect Biden and Vice President elect Kamala Harris's appearances, I hadn't even heard the phrase United States, I feel like, in 4 years. It's just been, America, make America great again, America first, yada, yada, yada. And, just hearing the word united as the first word of the name of our nation, of our collective society, of our collective democratic experiment, is something that it was like I heard it for the first time. Um, and so I certainly agree with you that I hope that, you know, I hope that the next administration will do a great job of expressing care and compassion for everybody in the nation, and not just supporters in the nation. And yeah, it's certainly a time to not be complacent, and to understand that there is a hell of a lot of work to do. I mean, we still have the Georgia runoff election that'll decide the Senate, and that's a huge race. So yeah, it's certainly a time um, to reflect on the work that we've done, but understand that there is still so much farther to go. But I hope this is a step in the right direction for sure.
I agree with you, RJ. And I really
Yeah.
like that you said we need that empathy, that compassion back, looking
Mm-hmm.
out for our fellow man, and that we are all united.
Mm,
And we mustn't
absolutely.
forget that. We
Absolutely.
cannot, with the new administration that comes into place, allow for it to be on their shoulders.
Right.
We need to think of how can we help support our government? How can we support our fellow man? Because it is going to take much more than one government to change what is happening in society. It changes
Hmm.
by one person being kind to one person who is kind to another. It
Yes.
is in one person can change the world by being kind to another.
Mm. That
That's
it's all
what
about
will
that ripple
affect
effect.
change.
Yes, absolutely. Well, a spiritual leader of mine once told me that, and this is while I was living in like the middle of Michigan, so I had like the Great Lakes around me, but I hadn't lived near water. But he told me, you don't need to live near the ocean for your actions to have an impact on the ocean. And ever since he told me that, I've sort of extrapolated that to all aspects of my life, that the tiny decisions that you make as an individual not only affect you, but they send ripples to those near and far from you. And that's something that I'm so glad that uh, you have spoken about so passionately, and that's something that you are really putting an emphasis on, both personally at NACB. So I thank you for the work that you're doing, and I hope that you continue to keep it up and help push the needle toward the direction that we all need to be at.
Well, thank you, RJ. And I thank
Yeah.
you. I think all of us are supporting one another and allowing our voice to be heard. I am just trying to be a vehicle of change and allowing people's voice to be heard and saying, I've heard your voice and I'm going to advocate for you. I think
Absolutely.
it's really important, and I want everyone's voice to be heard. This takes everyone to make changes in their life and changes to their fellow man in
Mm,
order to change the world that we live in today, to
mm,
change social equity, but to change peace, to change sustainability um, of this world. So everyone, as you said, that ripple effect, everyone
yes.
is helping and or hurting what we do as a society and as a world. As you see, I'm in New Zealand and I get up earlier, but I'm doing the same exact thing that I would be doing if I was in the States right now.
That's
And
right.
New Zealand has come out with medicinal cannabis
That's so rad.
and many other countries. So we are all, this entire world is really united. And some
Mm,
people may call me a dreamer, but I still believe that world peace is possible and that we will be able to have everybody rise up
mm.
in the United States and around the world, and we can all work as one.
Gina, some people may call you a dreamer, but I will tell you, you are not the only one. That's for damn sure.
I agree. I agree. There's so many people out there, and I want that to be recognized because we often overlook and say, oh, well, Trump has hurt us and all this negative things, but he has brought our attention back to each other. He has shown us that it is within our hands to control the discussion, and we have the power to make change.
Mm,
That may not be on the federal level, it may be on the state level, or it may just be in our own households. But
yeah.
every single individual has that power and that ability. And thank you, President Trump, for reminding us all of that. And
Yeah,
to
that's true.
remember that we need to support our fellow man.
Absolutely. I feel like I just went to church. I feel so inspired right now. Gina, thank you so much for the enlightening conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Best of luck on Monday during the conference. I wish you nothing but the best. I will be in the chat. So look for me in there, and please keep up the good work. Continue to be well. Continue to stay safe, and say hi to all the Kiwis out there for me.
Well, thank you so much. I've had a pleasure speaking with you today. And one message that I send to my fellow people of the United States of America, we will soon see changes happen with our country. I am so proud that there is a VP elected who is a female and a minority. Yes. And please wear your mask.
Yes.
Please. It is spreading way too crazy. And as I have mentioned, we impact each other, and we need to have compassion and empathy for the other person. So it is not about you contracting it. It is about preventing it from spreading. And please remember that. And I have seen just on social media and in newspapers that people are doing that at greater numbers. So I support you. We all think about you here in New Zealand and wish the States the very best.
Thank you so much. We have you in our hearts over here too. Thank you so much again for sitting down and talking to me. I really appreciate you taking the time, Gina. And hopefully we'll be able to talk again soon after the conference. I'll ask you how it went.
Wonderful. Thank you, RJ. So happy to be here today. Bye, everyone.
See you later. Talk to you soon. My thanks again to Gina Kranwinkel for joining me. If you are a member of the cannabis community and have a story you want to share with us, we would love to hear from you. You can reach the show at hashitout@trichomes.com. You can help others find the show by taking a moment to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at trichomes.com and following us on all social media. Hash It Out is produced by David Fortin and presented by trichomes.com. I'm RJ Balde. Thanks for listening.